Welcome to My Tech Opinion episode 16. My name is Phil Edwards and I'm in Melbourne, and I'll be joined in a moment by my regular co-host in Perth, Shayne Johnston. In this episode, our feature topic, we'll look at developing as a career, and we'll have a special guest joining us. So let's get the show underway now. Welcome to My Tech Opinion episode 16. My name is Phil Edwards and I'm in Melbourne, and I'll be joined in a moment by my regular co-host in Perth. Well, I am joined now, I should say, to Shayne Johnston. G'day, Shayne.
Hey, Phil, how are you?
Good. I'm just doing so well today. My Tech Opinion, just as a reminder to our viewers and listeners, My Tech Opinion is brought to you by Aussie Tech Heads Web Hosting. For great hosting plans and support, visit athwebhosting.com.au. For those who haven't caught the show before, My Tech Opinion is a show that looks at a feature topic each episode, and it won't be just us. Where possible, we'll also have guests take part that will have lend their expertise to our discussion of the feature topic. And today is one of those days. Our feature topic today will be looking at development and developer careers and things like that. And we're joined, he's going to jump in right now, by our special guest, Developer Steve. G'day, Developer Steve. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me. And it's so great to be on the show.
Thank you very much for coming along. We'll talk a bit of nonsense before we get into the crux of it. How have you both been, both Shayne and Steve? How's your week, month, whatever been? Been getting up to anything exciting?
Which one?
Either or. You choose. First in, best dressed.
You go, Steve. What have you been up to lately?
Pushed out some demos, some demo code. So I've got a couple new fun little demos kicking around that I can share some links for. Actually, the last one I did on late Thursday night was using emoji, getting user sentiment back from emoji interaction. So user sends in an emoji, and then you can get some sort of numbers back, some ranking numbers,
wow,
whether it's happy or sad, etc. Other than that, been at a hackathon, spoke at a meetup, helped a whole bunch of devs. Really cool. That was kind of my week, just the week.
Cool. Right, we'll get into the meat of that in a second when we actually get into the proper chat. It's going to be good.
Awesome. Shayne, what about yourself?
Since we last caught up, not a lot. Health-wise, I'm same as normal. Nothing's changed in the way of holidays. The holiday that I got planned at the end of the year is all kind of locked in, ready to rock and roll. House is still on the market. If you're looking for a house, Steve, that's on the coast in Mandurah over here in Perth, investment property, let me know.
Will do.
But other than that,
I have been to Perth a few times.
Oh, right.
I've hoping to get over there in the next couple of months to do a roadshow over there. But yeah, I love Perth.
Oh, we should catch up.
Totally will.
There you go.
Cool. But other than that, same dog, different leg.
All good. Well, as I showed on our last episode, that is a NBN modem, and as you can tell, it is not plugged in yet.
I told you on the last episode, it works better when you connect it.
Well, the NBN tech has to fix the port up out the front because they run fibre in my street. They run the distribution point units for the fibre to the curb, and then they plug my cable into the wrong port, which means that when you plug it in, it does nothing. So it's fantastic. So hopefully we'll be, from when we're recording this, 2 days to go, and then it might actually work.
So does that mean at the moment one of your neighbours is getting free internet?
I would doubt it, because if they had got the fibre to the curb already as well, they would potentially be having a similar issue. Or whatever, or their issue would have prompted it to fix mine. So me waiting for a tech to come out to unplug a cable and plug it into the other one, actually is I'm doing a community service for the rest of my neighborhood, because it will actually fix someone else's problem. Now, I'm assuming that I know what the issue is. I will know when they come out and fix it. But from what I've been reading, this is a common issue. And because the modem, when you plug it in, actually gets a connection to the distribution point unit. So it actually says I'm talking to it, but it's not detecting the fact that they've activated my port. So it's so close. This has been something that I've been waiting for, Steve, for I've probably, like, on my other show, Geeks Interrupted, we've been doing that for 5 years, and I've been crapping on about NBN for 5 years. I've been excitedly waiting to get something other than Telstra-based ADSL for 10, 12 years in my house. And it is so close that I can literally touch the modem, but it's not turned on. And then we'll know if it's all a disaster or if it's actually going to work well. Anyway, there you go. I could rant on about the NBN for hours, as other people could too. But we won't.
No.
The one thing that's happened since our last episode has been two things that have come out. One was the Health Engine in Australia, Health Engine data breach. And one that occurred in the UK, but it's impacting Australian users, is the Ticketmaster data breach. Now, as of 2 days ago, the Ticketmaster hack, they've sent out emails to people who have been impacted. Did. I actually got one myself.
Yes, I did.
I don't know why. Actually, why did I buy something from Ticketmaster UK? I was in the UK last year, but I bought it over the counter. Don't know why. But they still don't know what the cause of the problem is.
I signed up with Ticketmaster purely just to get the tickets to the NFL game I went to last year, so I've got no idea why it's gone through the UK.
But it was a Ticketmaster UK, so obviously their systems are all completely joined together. So they still haven't worked that out, but, we've continued to get on to... Now, the other thing is, if it's a UK issue, even though Ticketmaster's in Australia, do they have to be party to the notifiable data breach scheme? It is a legal requirement for businesses over a certain size in Australia. So... that's an interesting one. I would be interested to see what the cause of the issue is. Is it staff doing something stupid? Is it not doing appropriate hardening on their servers? Is it, there could be a multitude of reasons, but considering payment details specifically were part of this, it's not a good look for Ticketmaster.
True.
Anyone else have a thought on that?
I think it's. I mean, speaking so last year I was a CTO for a fintech for a while, and obviously security, particularly in the payment space, is like super critical.
Yeah.
Doing things like, and even this sort of goes back to my days as a PayPal evangelist, is Braintree tokenized payments, which Stripe also has something very, very similar, where credit card details basically aren't stored on the merchant server; they're stored somewhere else in a secured vault. And all of the actual merchant gets to store is a token. So without token and API credentials for that vault token, you can't do a payment. So I think implementing things like that, which I've no doubt Ticketmaster has, or the likes of Ticketmaster has. But I think you'd be interesting to see what the reason was.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. I mean, you specifically mentioned PayPal there. I avoid, where humanly possible, putting my credit card details directly into a website, and if I can use an alternate payment option like a PayPal or something like that, then I don't. But one of the only few websites I think I use these days where I have a credit card directly in there is Amazon, and if they have a data breach, then something's seriously wrong with the world, because they've got a lot of it's a massive risk to reputation, them releasing having a data breach, so it's within their best interest not to do it. So yeah, look, I think it's going to be interesting. I was at I work, and I need to be careful how I frame this. I work in government and doing information security policy, and I was talking to some externals the other day, and they're going, this particular service is not secure. And I'm like, okay, so is it a widespread problem? Have you got one person that had an issue, or have you got a whole group of people that have had an issue, and they go, I was one person. And I'm like, look, I'm not going to throw dispersions on your client, but chances are that your client's probably the one at fault. Like there's something that she or they, I don't want to, it was the client. We won't throw sexual, you know what I mean. Saying it's a female is bad. They chances are that they have probably done something that have unlocked their details for that particular service, and it's actually their fault. But if there's a widespread issue, it is a concern.
We actually have a new, slight product pitch, but I actually found one of the things that kind of blew my mind, one of the internal projects that we've actually just launched, a product called CloudSight that it's fully API driven, but it does PCI compliance checks across your cloud infrastructure. So it continually scans for things like, open or publicly available S3 buckets, which we've seen in the last 12 months. We've seen a few instances of that happening. And it's kind of easy to do. It's literally just a click of a button or the change of a permission on a folder on a server somewhere. But yeah, this will just continually check environmental infrastructure for any potential breaches of policies.
So Steve, when you're seeing businesses that are potentially have these data breaches,
mm-hmm.
Are they, if you've got, we'll say you've got two different systems. You've got System A, which is a company that's probably, we'll call a legacy company. They've been around for 50 years and they've progressively redeveloped their business into a certain space. And we'll say Ticketmaster's one of them. They're used to having, in Australia at least, it was, over the counter. You go and line up at a news agency to buy a ticket, and they would tap into their little, AS400 based system to get what you want. Where they've now, developed into an environment where basically they sell online. That's how they do their business. 90% of tickets are done that way now. Compared to a business that is set up a year ago and is purely an online space. So that the way that they've set up is as a digital first a marketplace. Do you find that the legacy businesses are the ones that are more likely to have those issues because they're having to upgrade their systems into an iterative environment, whereas other ones are just developing from fresh?
Yeah, I think interesting question, because you're going to see it on both sides of the fence. And it's something I talk about constantly with startups, because they'll actually quite often build out a bootstrap or something to test the model that their startup's built around. They'll forego the forward thinking of, hey, this is great. 1,000 people using the system now will turn into 100,000 in 2 months' time. One of the amazing one of the groups I think have done this amazingly well, and I'm still in awe of their infrastructure, is Facebook. So to give you an idea on the scale that their data centers now reach, every bit of information they sort of get from an interactive user is stored 3 times in their databases around the world. So you think one photo uploaded and all the interactions, triple redundancy. It's insane the scale at which the companies like that now, are storing data, not only to make sure it's protected, but also to make sure that it's backed up in case something happens to other data center. But yeah, they basically went, if you think, their early days, they went from 1,000 people to 100,000 in a month to, then having to deal with 1 billion users with a lot of data and a lot of uptime and a lot of attacks. The bigger you get, the more prime you become for attacks everywhere. Even PayPal, having seen some of their internal statistics, Web Payment Standard can get 250,000 requests a second without an attack. And then how do you determine, traffic throughput, which is legitimate and which is not? Super kudos to the PayPal DevOps team. That they do an amazing job, and it's a lot of stuff they can't talk about numbers wise. But they see a lot of traffic.
Look, it certainly is amazing. The traffic that goes on, and Yeah. So, and the thing is that we look at in those particular scenarios, I'm assuming that the type of data that the incoming data that they're dealing with at a PayPal level is probably going to be people trying to brute force get into the system. Whereas then you're looking at other systems, which is, a DDoS attack, which is just there to be a pain in the ass, to be perfectly honest. And I suppose it's an interesting world, and there's a lot of things that go on that we don't, that we probably don't know about, because businesses only, which, I sort of get it, but they only do tell you stuff when they need to tell you as well. So yeah, it's interesting, but look, it's something that a lot of money's going into this sort of thing, and rightly so. But that's what we expect to have when you look at the convenience of being able to do anything. As I said to someone the other day, the convenience of being able to check your bank balance while sitting on the toilet on your mobile phone, compared to, the ultimate security element of it is just not have those things. You just hope that we get our data protected. So yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. Anything else to add, Shayne, before we continue?
No, I don't think so. This is probably a good couple of topics to talk about in our kind of informal chat, because it does kind of lead in nicely to, to Steve being here and being a developer and all the things that they, he's up against as far as, getting the code right versus getting it out on time, and then, do you kind of sit on the code and make sure it's perfect before you release it, and then maybe miss a window, or do you release it knowing that there's a few bugs and that you'll catch up on them later on and all that kind of stuff? So it's a good segue, I think.
Absolutely. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a very quick break, and we'll come back and focus on our feature topic, which is talking to developer Steve about software development, his career in that, and some of the challenges. So you are listening and watching My Tech Opinion. We'll be back in a moment. And welcome back to My Tech Opinion. It is time for our feature topic. We're looking at software development and careers and all those sort of things. We've already met him, but he's joining us to talk his experience. Is developer Steve. G'day, Steve. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for being part of the show in general. Tell us a bit about what you do and your background as a developer and things like that.
Yep. So I'm actually a developer evangelist. So essentially, an evangelist is somebody that goes out and works closely with developer communities all over the world, just helping encourage best practice, open source, basically just helping the community sort of build out and thrive more. And that's usually in context of sort of working with a big corporate. So I kind of sit between community and big corporate, and being able to have that corporate presence in a non-corporate sort of way. So I am a dev. I come from a developer background. I was tech lead at Clemenger, and I've worked in agencies sort of as a senior dev. So I come from a developer background. And aside from all that, like, I've been coding since I was 8.
And how did you get into coding? And
it's the type of thing that found me, I think. I've often looked back on it and thought, how did I end up in this path? But I've always had a natural rapport with tech and sort of understanding it from every level. I think for me personally, like, once I understand how it works, I can use it to approach other problems, or even just think outside the box and sort of come at something a different way and be like, oh, but what about if we use this way? Which is always fun, because it always pushes the boundaries of what's possible.
Were you? Can I be rude and ask how old you are?
No, that's fine. Actually, not many people ever. It's interesting, because this does come up from time to time, and no one actually realizes my age, because I don't keep track of it. Like, I don't need to. I'm kind of legal enough to do everything in most countries. Wait, I actually interested to find out how old you think I am. There's no wrong answer.
No, I will say, I'm going to throw a curveball out there and say 36.
Nice. Actually, close-ish. So I turned 40 in November.
Cool. Okay. And the reason why I asked that was not as an age thing, but it's,
yep,
that you started at 8, so you're 2 years younger than I am. And I remember looking at getting the magazines and the books, and they had the code that you could write in, whether it be basic or whatever that. And you're
Yeah.
pretty well at the same age, because it was at 8, it's pre-internet, really,
Yeah.
unless you're a
Yeah.
bulletin board person or something like that.
Oh, I remember getting onto bulletin boards using Winstock. That's the one.
Yeah.
Back in the day, dialing up. I still miss that noise. Um,
Yep.
Something about the dial-up noise. I don't know. It's kind of soothing.
Yeah.
um,
It was like the yellow brick road leading you into
the world.
the world.
Actually, on one thing I always love finding out is, what was your first computer? I'm interviewing you now.
Yeah.
No. Well, mine would have been. I did have a VIC 20, Commodore VIC 20,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I moved up to a Commodore 64 for a long time.
Nice.
And then, I lusted after 86 machines, but then I finally got off my ass and bought one when I was old enough to buy one myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was probably where I started. What about you, Shayne?
I started on a TRS 80,
Ah.
then jumped the Commodore 64 and went for a 128D. And then I think from there I went more kind of mainstream, like an IBM line of clone or something.
I
Nice.
remember, was it the early Amigas, or was it that you could run in C64 mode so that you could play the games that were available for C64? There was some keyboard thing you had to do when you booted it up. Anyway, I'm talking nonsense now, but yeah, no, yeah. I had the VIC 20, and even my first the Commodore 64 I upgraded later on, but the Commodore 64 had the tape drive as well.
Oh, special mention. So mine was an Atari 800 XL, and I had the 5.5-inch floppy drive.
Oh wow!
So, but yeah, QBasic was my first programming language. Yeah, I still have memories of it on a blue screen with white font. You can run it on your phone now. That's how powerful they've become.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think there was something that was saying that the equivalent of the Apollo 11 mission to the moon was run on a equivalent to a 1995 Pentium 90. The entire operation, not just we're talking the entire kit and caboodle, not just one element of it, the whole thing. So it's amazing how things have gone through in over the years in terms of speed and things like that. So
Relatively short amount of time now, because you've got the whole Moore's law thing and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, it's phenomenal. So yes, but do you think we're at a period of time though? We're talking about hardware. We're at a period of time where, while we are seeing improvements, but we're maturing a bit. It's more about eking out the best. It's not a speed war anymore. It's more of a how can we do it better war? Do you think?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting. So the other night I was playing around with a new AI service that basically makes you music, and it's unique. It's from trained machine learning processes, so it will push out a unique song every single time, and also sync it to video, so you can upload video.
Cool.
But it got me thinking, like, the AI process that created that can't own that creation. Like, at the moment, it legally cannot own any creation it makes. So I have to own it for it, because it's not old enough yet to be able to do that. But I think, that's the road we're sort of looking forward in the future, is at what point does AI become responsible for the things it creates?
That's an interesting thing. This is a discussion that we've had, and I think we've had on the show, and we might have had on other areas, is the freak out about the Tesla autopilot in particular.
Yep.
That if I'm driving a car and I run over a pedestrian and they die, then ultimately I'm responsible for that occurring.
Yep.
If an autopilot does that or kills the occupant in the car, who is responsible? Is it Tesla? Is it, the person who is in the car? Where does the burden of proof fall from a legal perspective? And I think that's what they're going, well, if an autopilot does it and Tesla have done all the things that they need to do within reason, then who's at fault? And because we always want to blame someone for something.
Yeah, and it's something. I was sort of putting some thought to as well, particularly in the last sort of year or so when it's becoming more and more mainstream. A good friend pointed out that it's the driver, because they're the one that chose to not only be there, but they're the one that chose to activate the autopilot.
Yeah, and look, I agree. But then does the driver then turn around and say, well, hang on, you've told me that it works this way, and look, I'm not a lawyer, but that's where I think people are going, well, we want, if the autopilot failed, it must be Tesla's fault. If this happened, it must be this particular issue. So it's going to be an interesting world we live in with the automation of things. And if something, it's always fun and games until something goes wrong. And I think that we also saw at the was it the Google I/O, the voice assistant? Yeah,
I'm so waiting for that.
but the thing was that everyone's going, oh great, and then you're going, hang on, they're having conversations with people and it's not identifying who it is, blah blah blah, and they've just gone, hang on, okay, it's going to tell people that it's actually Google Assistant calling them. So
it legally has to in a bunch of states in the US and in Australia, because they record the call.
Right. So it's the recording the call that trips it, rather than necessarily that it's an AI doing it.
The AI engagement. But I tell you what, that was scarily good. It's copied us very well.
And combine that in with, which we haven't heard much about, and I think that maybe it's not as formed as they demoed it at, and also the other issues involved, but the Adobe voice synth that they demoed about a year ago, where they could type a word in, it would do learning of a person's
the Obama thing.
Yeah, it was Obama, and they used Jordan Peele or whatever it was, one of the Peeling dudes on stage, but how it was, you could just Photoshop for speech and it would just seem seamless, and then it would do word learning. So combine that with Google Duplex and you've gone, oh, hang on, where do we head? And the other thing is that a lot of companies now are using algorithms, voice detection as a form of proof of identity for accessing services. Now, I think that a voice AI will probably not, it would probably be detectable by that, but you can, as it's developing so quickly, that you can see that it could fool it relatively soon. So it's just an amazing things that the flow-on effects.
I think that this also highlights, and a good segue into Elon. Well, there's a few of them in it, but the OpenAI Foundation, who are sort of tasked with keeping, not so much keeping AI and machine learning under bay, but making sure it's used in the right ways.
Yep. So, all right. So then another question is, that you're developing a product, and we look at the Google Duplex as an example. Do you develop something, like, obviously you're doing it as a living, so often there'll be a purpose for what you're doing, but would you develop something because you can, as opposed to, and it even goes into the hacking discussion that we had before our break. Something comes up and you're a responsible hacker, but you go, oh, I can hack it, so I'll hack it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and for me, it's funny, the things that I've always found successful, or things that resonate with like a function or a service that people can use and reuse, is always come out of stuff that I just find useful. So one of the early things I ever wrote, this is going back maybe 2007-ish, I had a number of e-commerce businesses, and for each one, like I needed a Twitter account for, because social media stuff, but this was before you could switch accounts really quickly and really easily with the Twitter app or with third-party apps. So what I did was I wrote this. It was so basic, but it did the job. But from my main account, I could do a tweet out and attach a particular hashtag. My process would spot that, delete the tweet, and then tweet it from the account that I'd set up. So I could literally just run multiple accounts from one account. But my
Sure.
followers on my main account started to realize what I was doing, and they wanted to use it. So I rebuilt a second version, which had it as essentially like an engine. There's a bunch of different ones you could do this with now. But it would, I built it in a way that was just one function. So I could keep writing extra functions and it all used the same sort of process to drive it. So essentially it was all around particular keyword or hashtag recognition. So it would watch an account, pick up the tweets, or watch a hashtag, pick up tweets, and then do something with it. So you can create, and then it kind of opened the world up of I could create games. So I had Magic 8 Ball, for example, where you could ask a random question and it would respond with a random answer. And then even like tracking how much water you drink during the day and sort of a campaign engagement thing. But yeah, it was always something that stemmed out of something I kind of found a use for, and then things just kind of exploded. But to answer your question, yeah, always with a set purpose. Just because we can doesn't mean we should.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back a step, you said you got started, as a kid. Did you, in terms of an education perspective, did you then go, like, are you self-taught? Did you end up going and doing a uni course or professional vocational training or that sort of thing?
No, completely self-taught, which is kind of the thing you like in the open source world. Everything's shared and everything builds off everything someone else has either done, or an idea or a concept sort of taken to the next level. It's that always learning, always pushing that bar higher type thing. There's good opportunity to learn what you need from that and be able to self-teach. The only thing always to be mindful of when taking that approach is to make sure you have the discipline to follow sort of agile methodologies and stuff to make sure that you're going to be able to fit in with teams and whatnot. I think even sort of starting out early on, when you start to self-teach, it's always reaches a point where you're like, and this is kind of how I became a full-time dev, is you're always looking at it going, well, I know, I'm really good at doing this thing, but how am I against my peers? How am I against the industry? So you kind of take that plunge and become like a full-blown dev.
Do you think that you could continue doing that now? Do you, like, if you were starting again, would you, like, I say to a friend of mine that I haven't finished a university degree, and I'm probably one of the last of my generation that could get away with doing that in the current world. Do you think that in the developer world you can continue to be self-taught, or is there getting a higher expectation now that as you're coming through that you should have that bit of paper or something like that?
I'm going to say both. This is something I've given a lot of thought to, particularly like I've done a lot of talks and I work very closely with a lot of unis, a lot of TAFEs. I don't think there's a right answer for this. It's whatever, as an individual and as a dev, like it's what feels right for you. And I say that because there's advantages to going through a uni or a TAFE course, or even some of the there's other courses you can do, like developer-specific teaching organizations you can do stuff at as well. I think in the example of uni, like they teach methodology and they teach sort of the discipline behind it. May not always necessarily be up to date with industry, but industry can change in a week. If you look at Node, for example, some of the libraries and some of the the thinking behind how a lot of the code functions work can change so quickly. Like how does curriculum keep up with that type of approach? So yeah, I don't think there's actually a right answer for this. It's literally just going to come down to individual.
Cool. And sorry, Shayne, I'm gonna throw one more in there, and then we'll divert. And I need to be careful on how I put it. I'm aware of the irony of three men asking this question, because I've discussed this in other forums previously too. But
you got in trouble.
Yeah, we didn't get in trouble, but anyway, the diversity in the industry. One of the criticisms of probably the developer world is that it is primarily male based, and while I think it's increasingly less so, there's still a barrier. How do you? My theory is that we have to normalize, encouraging girls to. It's not a fix that you can do overnight, and it's a generational fix that you've got to encourage girls at school to get into it and develop it as a hobby, then pursue it in other areas, as well as obviously appropriate workplace diversity policy. But it's a generational. Do you think that how do you think that we should fix a problem, whether it's perceived or real, and things like that, in terms of diversity and inclusion in the industry?
Yeah, great question. And I'm, massive supporter for encouraging women in tech, particularly, and something that sort of comes to mind is even for, developer events. It's something I'm always mindful of, and something everyone should always be mindful of, making sure there's a good balance between the two genders. Particularly, there's been hackathons that I've called out for not having, all male judges, all male mentors, and it's like, come on, there's so many amazing women already in the tech industry that could totally be involved in this. I think it's definitely something that we need to call out, when we do see it and we know it's wrong, to make sure that there's a healthy mix.
Absolutely. Now, Shayne, did you want to add anything to that, or you've got your own set of questions?
I've got my own set of questions that you've already touched on a couple of them. So you mentioned open source a couple of times, and this isn't actually one of the questions I'd actually specifically wrote down, but I've been involved in a lot of projects at work around BYOD and a couple of other things that potentially I could have used open source solutions for. And my management always came back to me with kind of the same argument, is that with open source, there's that misconception that open source means that it's some dude in his basement somewhere sitting in his pajamas and writing code, and B, that it's free, which is probably a good argument if that was always the case. But the main thing that management have a problem with is that in their mind, as they term it, they don't have a throat to choke. With open source, the perception is that there's no central person that you can go to and say, this isn't working, this isn't, do this, do that, do the other, it's causing problems in our organisation, come in and help us fix it. Is that right? Is that wrong? Or
I'm going to give you the perfect comeback for that for next time. GitHub.com/Telstra. We open sourced one of our major projects in October, OpenKilda, which is basically a high latency flow controller for API-driven SD-WAN. Just to explain what that is basically we've got the ability via API to be able to deploy infrastructure across multiple public clouds, so Amazon, Google, Microsoft, etc., and 58 data centers globally. So we open sourced a major chunk of the project. And then since then, we've open sourced a bunch of other things, including a project I'm working with Monash fourth year students across Swagger CodeGen, or Open API Generator, as it's now called. Essentially, open sourced API management, which is under an Apache 2 license, so anyone can use it. I'm planning to use it, and at the same time, students got experience from working on a project with a major organization. But open source has it's that thing again. I come back to the earlier story of being able to share and sort of continually push that bar higher and sort of achieve a whole bunch of new things, because you can work together with an open community, sharing the same ideas, etc.
And the other, I suppose, the other thing is, and whether you agree with this approach or not, but there are a number of open source companies that provide software that is open source based, but then they provide a professional services support layer over the top of it. So you still get the person to choke, but then you get the benefits of having the core product being an open source tool as well, I suppose.
Yeah,
totally. And even Nginx, Telstra Ventures invests in Nginx, which is my go-to favorite. Like, I love Nginx. I loved it before I got to work closely with them. But there's a community edition, which is free. Like, apt-get install Nginx and off you go. Really, really light, fast weight. And then there's also the paid edition, which is a lot more high performing. You get a lot more stats from it. You get support, etc. So yeah, totally agree.
Excellent. And that said, I will also say that there's one thing that's an issue as well is that they talk about Microsoft products being very stable and you can control the release and things like that. Everyone's moving to Office 365 now, and Microsoft are pushing out updates to that you just have to take so quickly. So they're changing their way that they operate as well. So everyone's moving in different directions.
Yeah, and the good thing is, like, when there are security concerns or infiltrations detected in open source projects, like, the community gets behind that and fixes it as quick as possible, and then the update comes out. And if you look at Heartbleed a few years ago, the big SSL security thing, everyone jumped on it, and it was kind of squashed as quick as it was discovered.
Yeah, so
if not quicker.
So, a couple of other things that I want to kind of go back on that we've already kind of covered in the first couple of questions that Phil fired at you, but before we move on. So, with the way that you learnt, how majority of it seems to be kind of self-taught, I've always, I guess what's worried me about kind of going down that road is developing bad habits and learning the wrong thing. I might develop a way of doing something that takes 500 lines, but because I didn't learn it properly, someone like yourself could do the same thing in 50 lines. How do you kind of keep track of that and make sure that you're not picking up bad habits?
Yeah, great question. And I am by no means perfect, particularly with coding. There's always that. That's the thing I like about developer conferences, hackathons, and meetups is you get to share your ideas with peers. You'll be doing things that they don't even realize. Like the amount of times I've done a talk and just demoing some code in front of a group of people, and they're like, "Oh wait, what did you do there?" Or "What are you using there?" And then you can share what you know. And then at the same point, someone will yell out, "Hey, why didn't you do blah?" And you're like, "Oh yeah, I didn't think of that." So I think it's that, again, it's that great way of being able to share different methodologies, and that's kind of what a lot of the industry is based on, is always sort of taking and refining those ideas down and sort of getting the best you can out of that.
So it sounds like, and to kind of touch on the thing where you said you've been in the industry for 30 something years, and now we're in a space where it's all about sharing ideas and being collaborative and that sort of thing. Back in the day, it didn't start out like that. I mean, you had Microsoft, where Bill Gates wouldn't say anything to anyone without selling them licenses and all that kind of stuff. You had Steve Jobs and Apple, and even to this day, Apple are really secretive. What changes have you kind of noticed over the time that you've been involved in the industry and the way things have developed? I mean, you've also mentioned the Agile framework, but I mean, that seems to be flavour of the month. I know back in the day there were other frameworks like Waterfall, other ones that kind of escape me. So just give us a bit of a summary of what changes you've sort of seen and what have been good and what haven't been good and that sort of thing.
I think we've just grown up technologically. I think it's kind of that the industry's kind of as a whole at some point noticed that the more you can share your ideas, I think actually probably a good good thing to sort of segue into that is when I was tech lead, working on a whole bunch of projects for different companies, like a lot of the stuff I was developing, you can't actually talk about externally, which is a shame because like I was coming up with whole new techniques, like whole new things. Like I built an Instagram printer for a phone company at one point, which was used in experiential events. But what I did was use a cheap $70 printer and what was it? Oh, it was a Chromebook and just a cheap Chromebook that I kind of customized a Linux kernel on. But it would have been great to sort of share that back so other people could not only add to the idea, but they could use it as well. Like it's that whole continually sharing. I mean, you could have 3 or 4 different companies all working on exactly the same thing and all sort of keeping it to themselves. But if they work together, well, then they get the power of 4 different organizations sort of working on that as well. And the end solution may look slightly different, but it's all going to be based on the same tech.
Yep. Okay, fair enough. And what else did I want to ask you about while I had your attention around the same sort of thing? I guess now you call yourself a full stack developer. What does that actually mean, and what other types of development are there?
I actually need to update. Did you get that from my website? I
Yeah.
need to update that. I've recoined. I think particularly last year, as a CTO, like it's not only the technology stack you work with, but the stuff around the technology stack. So PCI DSS 3.2, which is the whole sort of compliance scheme around payments. Sort of working on the outside stuff that sits around and supports the tech from a compliance, legal, and sort of regulatory standpoint. I can do all that as well. Plus, UX, UIing, and before the show, we were talking about video rendering, including the use of the green screen behind me. I should totally just, and for me, like personally, everything I do is just me geeking out. And that's the way I kind of ended up approaching, even particularly since I've become an evangelist since 2014, it's me geeking out on stage in front of friends, or me geeking out building code demos. I actually don't consider this a career anymore. This is just what I do and love.
Okay, so you mentioned being an evangelist, and what, and you've worked with companies such as Zero, Braintree, PayPal, and Telstra. What is an evangelist? Tell us what that is and how it works.
In my official job interviews, usually what I do is say you're basically an evangelist operates as a funded startup because you do everything and you're everything to someone internally. So much so that most companies don't know where to put you. As an evangelist, I've been in marketing attached, or organizational chart wise attached directly to a president of Braintree back in the day. I've been in IT, I've been in sales, even though I don't do sales.
Yeah.
You're everything to everyone because you kind of end up doing all the things. Essentially, end of the day, like working close to the community. On the organizational side of things, you do sponsorships, you do your own booking for travel because you're always at like conferences, meetups, etc. So since 2014, I've done 470,000 kilometers. I actually think it's higher. I think I need to update that stat.
Wow.
And I did my 119th developer talk on Thursday night in Sydney. I do a lot of talks, so writing a lot of white papers, a lot of proposals, live code demos, developer support, sometimes some light pre-sales, so people will reach out and say, hey, we want to do this. Can we get, in touch with someone for commercials and pricing, etc. A lot of developer support. All the open source stuff. So on the Telstra GitHub right now, there's 39 repos. 29 of them are mine. There's actually a bunch more coming. I just haven't pushed them up yet.
Cool.
It's a very wide and very action-packed day, from meeting to code to support to emails. And that's the thing I love. Like I don't like sitting at a desk sort of just coding away or answering emails, etc. I like to be out amongst the community, sort of working co-working spaces, etc.
Cool. Now, I'm going to sidetrack for one question, but you've mentioned it a couple of times. Yep. Microsoft bought GitHub.
I was going to ask the same thing.
Your thoughts?
There was a lot of fallout that I saw from a lot of communities, developer communities, and I don't know if I could say too much for or against. I think it was definitely a good acquisition by them. Like it made a lot of sense. And I know Google was also one of the other interested parties at the time. I think that's come out in the last couple of days. So Telstra Ventures invests in GitLab, and good friends at GitLab were rather busy that week because there was a sizable increase in their traffic. I think with these decisions, there's always going to be people that may not necessarily be happy with it, and they're going to move, but they've got that choice as a consumer, as a user of a platform. Like there is options that they can move to.
Cool.
Right, can I go?
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Wasn't sure how we were going to do tag teaming or what the go was.
Just stacks on.
Yeah.
Hey, I haven't even used a developer joke yet. I've got a bunch of them. Did you want to hear one?
Yeah, go on.
Might as well.
How many developers does it take to screw on a light bulb?
I've heard it, but I can't.
I
think
have
of the
actually
back
heard this one, but
Yeah.
I can't remember it. No, I don't know.
None. It's a hardware problem.
There you go.
True.
Yeah, and sometimes people have always heard that one. So there is a follow up one as well. Is the how many testers does it take to screw in a light bulb?
Don't know.
No.
None. They just prove darkness exists. It's someone else's job to fix it.
Right, there you go.
Okay, so you've mentioned that part of the aspect of being an evangelist is the community side of things and your community involvement, and that's something that you sound like you're really passionate about. You've mentioned hackathons and that sort of thing. Tell us a bit more about a hackathon. I mean, what happens at one? Why have them? Are they beneficial is it just a way of a group of people that aren't normally socially adapt because of their IT background, stereotyping them? Is it just a way of them being able to kind of mingle with people that they can actually relate to? Or is there purposes to them? Have you brought any to Perth? Are you going to bring one to Perth?
I think Shayne's asking to bring one to Perth.
Yeah.
I've had a few requests to take our roadshow over to Perth, so it's definitely on my radar. I just have to get some speakers over there. But yeah, highly likely. In fact, and we can talk about this one in a sec. We're going to bring some of these with us. It's our IoT stuff. But
Cool.
anyway, we can get to that one. Yeah, great question. Hackathons. I've done a lot of hackathons full spectrum. So community-run ones, which rely solely on sponsorship, on company sponsorships, right through to corporate ones. So PayPal Battle Hack, for example, and they've all sort of the recurring theme between them all is that for a dev or for designers or people involved or hustlers, the idea is to pick your skills, learn new ones, and sort of learn some new stuff. Again, sort of sharing knowledge amongst teams and sort of coming up with new ideas. The thing I love most for me about hackathons is you never know what you're going to see. Like there's always that one team or those teams that are always working on something that you just never thought of doing. Like it's always that left field approach. A great example of that is Battle Hack Tokyo in 2015. Two of the teams that were sort of most memorable out of that, one came up with I never thought to do this, and I'm totally still got to buy one, but they attached an alpha sensor to some robotic rabbit's ears, and the more happy you were while you watched a movie, the more they would move and the more you would pay for the movie.
Huh.
Completely really interesting use of an alpha sensor, Arduino alpha sensor. One of the other teams to come out, so they actually won second place. They produced this little sticker printer. So tracking hashtag on Instagram and social media, it would grab all the images and then allow users to scroll through and pay to print out like little sticker tabs of the event. Interestingly enough, that company is still running. So SNAP, Snoosnap, they're still in operation. They now hire a whole bunch of developers. Like they've got a full-blown company. They've got they have this really interesting setup where it's multiple cameras, like Matrix bullet time style, and they can do miniature GIFs that they'll send to your phone, and you stand in front of them, and it does like a really nice scenery. So cool. But yeah, it's not uncommon for startups and sort of companies to come out of a hack. For the company run ones, for the company, it always just means that you get feedback, like direct feedback from developers using your APIs, integration things like on site. And again, like you never know what people are going to build. Like, there'll be new things, new ways that everyone will come up with that you just never thought of doing because you work so close with it. And then for participants, just the opportunity to hone skills and learn new ones.
Okay, and
Cool.
is there usually like a theme? Like, does the person running it say, okay, you need to build something that does, in this industry, or is it a free-for-all and they can just do whatever they want?
Depends on the hack. It varies. Sometimes it will be for charities. So there'll be a number of charities needing solutions built out. One of the last ones I competed in as a dev was like that. You get aligned to a charity and they say, well, we need something to do this, this, and this. What do you want to do? And then other times, like Battle Hack was geared around sort of using PayPal Braintree APIs to build something that solves a local problem. The one I'm gearing up to do with Telstra Dev, and totally noting that it needs to come to Perth, it will be around using Telstra APIs, and we have a bunch of them now and a bunch more coming, including the IoT stuff. So cool. It'll totally be geared around a different theme for each city. So the one that I run in Melbourne will be geared around building tools that help devs in their day-to-day jobs, for example.
Okay.
You mentioned IoT stuff, and before we started our record today, so for the little people listening, you had a heap of stuff that you were showing us.
I do.
Boards. Show us some of the things you've got there and how you've been using it and working on it.
Yeah, so probably one of the first sort of good sized boards I ever got to start geeking out with was this one, which is the Arduino Yuan. I realized the camera's backwards, but yeah,
that's right. We can see it. We can see it normally, so it's all good.
Cool. So this was one of the early Arduino boards to have Wi-Fi built in. So they were like $70 a board back in the day. So I bought that in around 2014. And yeah, that was the reason why I got it, was it had Wi-Fi built in, which meant I could have an online sort of experience, interactive experience for a user. Just being able to connect to a tethered phone, for example. The only sort of drawback was, so in IoT terms, there's two sides to this board. There's a very light Linux open running WRT on one side, and then on the other side's the Arduino bits. So essentially you had to work between the two, because it's essentially got like a really light web server on it.
Yep.
You'd have to do your analytics or gather your data on that side, and then try and pass it over to the Arduino side via a very latent bridge. So there was times, and what I used it for, one of my most used demos was a receipt printer. Basically, you'd put an order through on a website, the receipt would print out on a thermal printer, and it was all powered by that. The problem was passing stuff through the bridge. It may not be there when you are expecting it to be there. So you'd put stuff in, and then maybe about 2 minutes later, it would appear to the Arduino side.
Wow.
Wonderfully quirky. The thing that really blew my mind is the year that I bought that one for like $70. These came out and that's got Wi-Fi in it for about $5.
Now, for those who are listening on the podcast, I'll get you to explain what it is, but it's about the size of a little bit bigger than a micro SD card.
Yep.
So what is that? That's
an ESP8266-1. And it rolls right off the tongue, right?
Yeah. You can see why they sold millions of them on the mainstream market. No, actually,
they did sell, like, these were so popular because, like, there wasn't a lot of Wi-Fi alternatives at the time. It was essentially the likes of the Arduino Yuan. The thing was, though, and this sort of comes back to the open source stuff, is they brought out 6 more like over the next 6 to 8 months, and they got smaller and faster and more powerful, and so they're currently up to the 32, which has Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and a whole bunch of sensors all built in for about $4 each. So cheap.
Wow. And so they're more of like a system on a chip type thing.
Very, very, very basic system, but you only need sort of something very basic in a lot of that sort of low-end IoT stuff. It's literally gathering the data to send somewhere or trigger something to happen. So I push a button and a door opens, or I activate an app and a door opens, or temperature sensors, or like whatever it needs to do. You literally just need to power it, have it do the thing, and send that somewhere or interact in some way.
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to go controversial and ask the question that probably every developer kind of dreads being asked about. And it kind of lines up with how things have probably changed over the industry as well. Programming languages. Why are there so many? Why isn't someone come up with, and maybe they haven't, I'm just not aware of it, why haven't they done the whole Lord of the Rings thing and come up with one language to rule them all?
I'm actually glad there's not one language to rule them all, because right tool, right job. There's and kind of this does come down to personal preference as well. So I use multiple of languages. I have, depending on what I need to do at the time, I have different ones I'll go to do different things. And it literally comes down to experience of knowing sort of the strengths and weaknesses of various of each language type. My go-to for most web type things is either PHP, Node, or Ruby. Just depending. Also, it depends what I've got running where. So I run a multiple of servers for different things, websites, etc. If I'm doing something web related, I'll probably do it in PHP or Ruby or Node. I did a Node demo last week using Socket.io, Realm. Actually, it was my first time using Realm. It was pretty good. And Express.
So that's the other thing you've touched on, because like Node is Java, as I understand it. JavaScript is kind of like the language that kind of sits at the top, and then that's broken up into, you've got your Node.js, you've got your all the others that have escaped me. But basically, JavaScript isn't its own thing anymore. It's got its own little kind of offshoots.
Yeah. And the Node side, the last 3-4 years has been like pretty huge. There's a massive community behind that. It's used for pretty much everything. It's a very lightweight and heavy lifting language, so it can handle a lot of load really quickly, really easily. Easy enough to set up. Like the demo I did the other day, I've got it running on a server, but it's running through Nginx Plus, just a proxy pass straight through to Node, which runs locally, just through npm. Actually, PM2 runs it on Ubuntu. So yeah, knowing again, like I don't think there's ever any right answer for this. The thing I always kind of say to startups and to devs is to make sure it passes the Friday night rule. And like I've been there so many times. You get that dreaded call at 9 p.m. You're halfway through a bottle of wine, and someone's telling you the server's down. Like it needs to be something you know how to support when you've had those few drinks. Yep. It needs to be something you can support in your sleep.
Cool. Yeah. I'm surprised you never mentioned Python, because doing some Googling and all that kind of stuff, in relation to this, mainly in just my own interest, Python seems to be kind of flavour of the month at the moment.
Yeah, Python's cool. I like Python and Flask. They're my favorites in the Python world. And Python's one of those great, like extremely heavy lifting languages. Like it's used in scientific research quite frequently to do, counting the number of genomes and RNA things and DNA strands. Like it's really heavy lifting, very scientific, amazingly great. Like it's one of those solid, if ever I need to do, particularly machine learning too. There were some demos that I did a few months back where I was using PyTorch to do some machine learning stuff. Actually, I hooked it up to SD-WAN and was able to do predictive analysis on traffic flowing between endpoints in a network. And then the idea was that I could also, that was using an untrained process and then turn that into a trained process, so it could predictively spin up connections between servers when it knows that it would be expecting high traffic.
Wow, cool.
Yeah. So someone just starting out then, or actually I'll break the question up in the parts. I guess you would probably say to someone who's in their late teens, who may have dabbled in computing as they were growing up, they would probably still be able to go down the university path if they wanted to get into software development. But say someone in our age bracket who's kind of mucked around the edges, done a bit of PHP in a couple of uni courses that I did online. I've done HTML, but never really kind of taken it anywhere. You would probably lean towards the online courses or the online companies like your lynda.com and those sorts of things to kind of hone the skills, or would you sort of say maybe more aim at the community side of things and just start going along to hackathons and just pick up pieces and pick up different techniques, and is there one language or is there a couple of languages that people should kind of focus on nowadays? Because obviously things like, I'm guessing there's probably no need for COBOL programmers anymore, and
actually, I know a few organizations that are still using it. It's still around. I think there's an open Cobalt now too on GitHub somewhere.
And there's organizations who have legacy systems that they need people. Like I think it was AS400 or something like that. It was
I used to administer one of them.
that if you know it, you'll earn a lot of money because there's organizations that are trying to get rid of it and they can't get the right people, and it's crazy. Anyway,
there we go. There's GNU Cobalt. The project just renamed not long ago, but yeah, it's open source Cobalt, which is amazing.
Cool.
Yeah, and again, like this stuff surfaces out of there's organizations still running it, and they need it for various operational reasons. So it's great to see, community watching this sort of stuff. To come back to the other question, the so the way I sort of started out was particularly sort of building that sort of agency credit back in the early days was I built my own stuff. Like that's the reason why I had multiple online stores is it didn't cost me anything to build them other than time. And at the same time, I got to learn how to set up WordPress, how to get that up and running, Magento, like initially on shared hosting, but shared hosting is not always the best for uptime and sort of security. So that kind of then moved on to the need of sort of having somewhere more stable. Like I learned to build my own limp stacks. Which you can do quite easily on the likes of Microsoft, Google, Amazon. They all have free tiers. So Amazon free tier, for example, gets you an EC2 micro for 12 months with some fairly sort of solid bandwidth and stuff on there. So you can quite easily build a couple of sites on there, build your own sites, spin up a WordPress instance with WooCommerce, hook up PayPal, and you can start selling stuff really quickly. Sort of just using that as examples of stuff you've built, like stuff you deployed. People can see it, people can interact with it. Then there's also, get involved in an open source community and help sort of build out functionality, or even just testing sort of stuff other people have built to make sure that it's, it's workable. And yeah.
Okay. What's the difference between, sorry, Phil, what's the difference between, because there's terminology that's been kind of thrown around over the years. You've got software developers, software engineers, programmers, coders. Are they all the same thing, or are they differences between them all?
There's differences. So if you're talking sort of things like front-end dev, back-end dev, DevOps, there's differences between what a lot of those groups do. Although I think particularly in the cloud sort of deployment space, because it's becoming a lot easier and a lot quicker to deploy now, particularly when you're dealing with microservices, some of those lines often either blur or move. So if you look at serverless, for example, well, they don't need a server to run on, so you don't need traditional infrastructure per se. And the developer basically deploys the code which starts the service. So, no server required, except there's probably a load balancer or some type of throughput at the start of that whole journey. I think that can often change. But yeah, so if you look at like the DevOps title, that's basically an operations person that also codes,
Yep.
Which I think sort of also became critical as those lines kind of moved around a bit, but also so that ops knows and understands how the code runs and why it's written the way it is. I think over the years that just kind of evolved out of the need of sort of ops needing to understand that more. And it kind of broke down the barrier between devs and the operational side. We see sort of the reasons why in the TV show Silicon Valley, where you see the person running all the ops server infrastructure always criticizing the back-end dev for, the shitty code that they wrote. And it's like, no, it's your shitty servers. It's always that give and take. Whereas in the DevOps world, they understand the need for the code and the need for the infrastructure.
Yeah, cool. And then you got your, like, because I work in IT admin support, so like, looking after users and servers and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I guess the closest that we get to any coding of any sort is scripting, like would it be PowerShell scripting, that kind of stuff, just more around automating, kind of mundane tasks. That still kind of falls into the category. It wouldn't be software development per se, but I guess that still falls into the category of coding.
Yeah, totally does. And, massive kudos not only for being, admin support and dealing with those testing
Users.
of patients' questions. I was being tactful. Yeah, but also for automating stuff. Like, I think that's great. Like, the more that can be automated, yeah, that's basically how I became a dev, was just noticing the need for things to run smoother, things to run without me being there and having to manually handle them. If I can write a process to replace one thing that I do a day, well, then I have time to do one more thing on top of that and continually push that line of productivity out. So yeah, the more you can automate, totally for that.
Unless, of course, you're the person that works on the service desk and is more than likely be the person that gets replaced by all the automation, which is where I kind of fit in.
Yeah, but if you can understand, sort of help make that automation even better, then that makes you more valuable because you're the one sort of being able to deploy and find new uses for it.
Yeah, true. You're
That's
dying
the
to
way.
I think if the service desk, the issue is never on the back end side of things. It's always with the person who's actually contacting the service desk.
Yeah, it's always a pebcake error.
Yeah.
I have a question on that actually. Have you ever used the classic IT crowd line? And I will be disappointed if you say no.
Every time, and everyone knows where it comes from. Have you tried turning it off and turning on again?
Oh, right.
Nice.
Oh, yeah, no.
I even say it with an Irish accent.
Back in the day when I used to do tech support for a ISP, and this is in dial-up days, it was turn off, turn it back on again, and it was we always used to have a key string that we would get them to put into their modem settings that would just slow their modem down. That's all it did. But it was actually worked half the time because it would get a more stable connection. But buddy dial-up modems. Anyway, that's gone back a long time.
The noise needs to come back into modems.
Oh yeah.
I was tempted to try and put it into mine. I've got what is it? Open, not WRT, DDWRT running on mine. And yeah, I was trying to work out a way to hook a speaker up so I could get it to do it, and it'd probably drive me crazy after a while.
Yeah. Now the other thing is, see, I had the last dial-up modem I had before going to broadband. I had a US Robotics 56K modem. And I will stand by it and say it was the best piece of hardware I have ever owned of anything. It worked every single time, did not fail, no problems.
Nice.
Great. It just there's you've always got that bit of hardware that only gets retired because it's no longer useful, as opposed to you don't want it anymore. There's always something that you go, oh, I'm going to upgrade that because I can, or I'm going to upgrade it because the other one's broken. This only got upgraded because I went to broadband for otherwise if it was dial-up was still a thing, I reckon I'd still be using it to this day. But anyway, I'm talking shit now. It's all good.
Well, I'm out of questions. You got anything else you want to ask, Steve?
I was going to say it is getting time to finish it up. The question I will ask you, Steve, as a final one is, we've sort of gone on getting into it, but if someone said to you, can you tell me in 2 sentences or 3 sentences what I should do to become a developer? Like what are a couple of tips that I should do, as we'll say a 12-year-old student, what should I follow? Tell us what you think they should be.
I'm actually going to suggest something that not only covers people just starting out, but those already in sort of established in all phases of developing. The thing I think I'd love to see more devs have is their own domain name. Like, set up your own domain and have links to your GitHub and like your social media stuff. Like, show how you're getting involved and the projects you're involved in, and then show your work. Like, if you're on, even if devs have code examples on the likes of CodePen, like link to it or have a feed of them on your website so that people can see what you do. I think it's and it kind of fits because if you're a web dev or a front end dev, like that's the site you can send people to show them what you're capable of and what you're working on.
Awesome.
Starting out, I think starting out as a new dev, like try all the main languages, see which one fits best. Like there's going to be ones that you'll like more than others, or ones that you'll just notice, languages that you'll notice different strengths in, or different ways that you can use it to support the Friday night rule when needed. But definitely, like, it's open source. You can install stuff on Windows, on various computers, servers, and just give it a spin. Like, do a hello world, which is the basic walking steps of most languages.
Yep.
But that,
so
that's
in short, you're saying don't be afraid to try it out.
Totally, don't be afraid.
Cool. And now we've got your website on the screen right below your face, Steve. Developersteve.com is so people can see links to your code from there. And I was just looking at it myself, and your social media and all that sort of stuff. Is there any other ways if people want to contact you? Just go to your website and they can send a contact from there?
Yeah, or reach out on social. Always happy to connect, have a chat, geek out. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Steve, we'll finish it up there. Thank you very much for joining us on My Tech Opinion. We appreciate your time.
Yep. Thanks for having me. Been great.
Thank you, and good luck with all of the development stuff that you're going to continue doing. And I'm sure, there was things that you mentioned that I'm like, oh, I remember, there was stuff that you're talking about with social media, the Magic 8 Ball. I remember that at one point. So, we'll look forward to seeing all the little things, or even the bigger things that you continue to produce. So awesome. Thanks very much, Steve.
And let me know when you're coming to Perth with the hackathon.
Totally will. Working on it, just need to work out. Yeah, schedule. The year's getting very, very full.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem.
All right, we'll finish up there. We'll take a very quick break on My Tech Opinion, and we'll be back after this. And welcome back to My Tech Opinion. We are finishing the show up. Thank you very much, Shayne, to Developer Steve for talking to us. That was awesome. It was a really good conversation. I was really happy with that.
Yeah, no, it was good. One of the better ones. Yep.
Absolutely. We're going to go in our next episode. We're going to talk about video gaming, and whether it be console, PC, what have you. But specifically, is it bad for our children or us even? I play things like COD, and I may feel a little bit violent after I play those games. So we'll talk about that on our next episode. That'll be episode 17. If you've got any questions, thoughts about that, or in your thoughts about this particular episode, feel free to send us an email, mytechopinion@prosumerit.com. Also, our show has been brought to you by we'll say that again. This show has been brought to you by Aussie Tech Heads Web Hosting. For great hosting plans and support, visit athwebhosting.com.au. Remember also reviews.
Yes.
So if you'd like to leave us a review, there's the Apple Podcasts app. And I think you can do it on the Google one now. Is that right?
Yeah, we're everywhere now. We're on the Apple. We're on the Google podcast app. We're on TuneIn Radio. I haven't seen it's officially on Spotify, but I applied for it probably about a week ago. We're not going to be able to do that running joke about the Google Home anymore because we got it sorted.
Yeah. So we think we worked it out because there's similar program names. It's about saying it right, and it works.
Yep.
But you can hear it on all your home devices and all that sort of stuff, which is always good. And if you can't, just get it on your phone and you can push it to your speakers anyway. So it's easy.
Yep.
Remember our website, prosumerit.com/MTO, and you can see the YouTube video there or get to the audio files. If you want to look at us talking nonsense for an hour and a half or something, you can do it on YouTube, or you can just plug it into your ears and do it in the when you're in the car. For those who are watching the video, yes, I am wearing glasses in this particular episode. I was a bit tired, and I thought I'll wear them today so I could actually read.
He was hungover, people.
I probably won't wear them next episode, but you never know. You never know. But that's it. We'll be back with our next episode soon. Thank you very much, Shayne.
No problem, Phil.
And hopefully Developer Steve will get a hackathon over there into Perth and you can go along and harass him.
Do you think I kind of got the point across?
I think you got the point across. There was no problems there at all. Nah, it's all good. All good. So yeah, that's it. We'll see you all on our next episode, which will be episode number 17. But in the meantime, this has been My Tech Opinion, and we'll say goodbye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.